sometimes the changes come so quietly we barely notice them. A little more fatigue in the morning, a meal skipped without hunger, a favorite hobby that suddenly feels exhausting. For many seniors after 65, especially those living in the quiet suburbs of Ohio, the breezy hills of Yorkshire, or the cozy neighborhoods of Toronto, these subtle shifts are brushed off as just aging. But what if they were more than that? In today's episode of Elderly Reflections, we uncover 5 silent warnings your body may be giving you, signals that it's aging faster than it should. Backed by real stories from seniors across Europe and America, and grounded in senior health research, this isn't just information, it's a conversation. One about awareness, reflection, and preparation, because recognizing these signs early might just be what keeps your independence, your vitality, and your peace of mind intact. If this resonates with you, subscribe and turn on notifications. You'll receive more stories full of elderly wisdom, senior inspiration, and timeless life lessons from those who've walked the path before us. Carol was 72 when she began noticing something odd. A small thing at first. Her favorite jeans no longer hugged her hips. They slid down without unbuttoning. Her daughter teased, "Mom, are you secretly dieting?" Carol laughed it off. "Maybe I finally lost those last few pounds," she said, reaching for her morning toast, unaware that this harmless joke would be the first clue that her body was changing. Within 3 months, she had lost nearly 20 pounds. But she wasn't exercising more. Her appetite hadn't dramatically changed. There were no major health complaints. Just clothes growing looser, bones feeling sharper beneath the skin, and a quiet fatigue that crept in between daily tasks. This is how unintentional weight loss often begins in seniors. Subtly, silently, without fanfare or pain. Yet for those over 65, especially in communities across North America, it is one of the most overlooked signs of deeper health issues. According to the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, losing more than 5% of body weight in 6 months without trying is considered a clinical red flag. For many seniors, this loss is mistaken as a natural part of aging. But science says otherwise. Aging may reduce muscle tone, yes, but rapid weight loss is rarely benign. It often points to malnutrition, undiagnosed cancer, thyroid disorders, malabsorption, chronic inflammation, or even early-onset dementia. Dr. Evelyn Burke, a senior health physician in Ontario, often warns her patients' families, when an older adult loses weight without trying, don't compliment them. Investigate. Their body might be using muscle and fat as emergency fuel because it's no longer processing nutrients properly. In Carol's case, the truth was sobering. After months of declining strength and a diagnosis delay, doctors discovered early-stage pancreatic cancer. Surgery and treatment followed, but the delay cost her vital strength and time. She didn't look sick, her daughter told us. She just looked smaller and a little quieter, like she was fading, but we didn't want to say it out loud. This is a common thread in many elderly reflections. The signs were there, but no one connected them. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know. Carol's story is one of many that remind us. When the body begins shedding weight without reason, it's not a cosmetic issue. It's the body whispering, "I'm not absorbing. I'm not digesting. I'm not okay." Unfortunately, the silence of this symptom is what makes it so dangerous. It creeps in during quiet months, disguises itself as diet success, and too often goes ignored until weakness, dizziness, and illness arrive. The lesson here, drawn from real stories, medical evidence, and life lessons from the elderly, is not a panic but to pay attention. Weight loss in older adults should be seen as a call to action, to schedule blood work, examine nutrition, and check for inflammation or organ function decline. Prevention is not a luxury. It is a form of dignity, one that seniors deserve. In this season of life, small physical changes often carry the heaviest messages. A second and equally deceptive signal of accelerated aging is persistent fatigue. Frank, 76, a retired firefighter from rural Oregon, once boasted of stamina that put younger men to shame. Even into his late 60s, he fixed fences, pruned apple trees, and volunteered at the local fire station. But one winter, things began to change. He started sleeping longer, but waking more tired. A 10-minute walk left him winded. He began sitting more, doing less. "It felt like someone was unplugging my energy," he said. "I wasn't depressed, I wasn't sick, I was just empty." At first, his family thought it was seasonal. A little vitamin D, maybe. But months passed and Frank's energy didn't return. He began napping mid-morning, skipping church, forgetting appointments, and declining simple invitations. The man who once lit up the room was now living in slow motion. The truth? His fatigue wasn't just old age. It was his body signaling that systems were slowing, redistributing energy to basic functions, and deprioritizing the rest. What many don't realize is that aging doesn't cause deep, unshakable fatigue. Disease does. Deficiencies do. So do hidden cardiac conditions, thyroid imbalances, low iron, sleep apnea, and even low-grade infection. As Dr. Jerome Nash, a geriatrician in Toronto, puts it, when rest no longer restores, the body is asking a deeper question. And yet fatigue remains one of the most misunderstood and normalized symptoms among seniors. Why? Because it doesn't show on scans, because it isn't dramatic, because it can be managed with caffeine, skipped over with rest, or brushed off with old phrases like, well, I'm not as young as I used to be. But those phrases can become dangerous when they replace real medical attention. Frank's turning point came during a routine checkup, when his doctor noticed his low hematocrit levels. Further testing revealed severe B12 deficiency and iron deficiency anemia. Weeks after starting supplementation and changing his diet, Frank began feeling stronger. It was like someone had turned the lights back on, he said. I started singing again in the Sunday choir. My wife cried when I finished my first solo. But many seniors don't get that moment. Their fatigue remains unexamined, growing heavier each month, until they slowly withdraw from life. This withdrawal is not laziness, it's exhaustion. And often it's treatable. That's the elderly wisdom that matters. Not every symptom of aging is irreversible. In fact, many are reversible if we only take the time to ask why they're happening. A tired body is a talking body. It's telling us something. The stories of Carol and Frank teach us that aging doesn't have to mean fading. It means listening more closely, observing patterns, refusing to normalize suffering in silence, and most of all, choosing to respond with dignity, medical attention, and human compassion. In the next part of this series, we'll explore two more hidden warnings: subtle cognitive shifts and a weakening immune system. Two quiet changes. Henry, a retired piano teacher from Edinburgh, had always been known for his sharp memory and graceful charm. Even in his late 70s, he could recall the names of every student he'd ever taught, could hum Mozart's concertos from memory, and told stories of his youth with theatrical precision. But last autumn, things began to blur. At a family dinner, he forgot the name of his own granddaughter. The room fell silent for a moment, then quickly shifted the topic. No one wanted to admit it felt like the beginning of something serious. Within weeks, Henry was misplacing everyday objects, repeating stories, and pausing mid-sentence, as if his thoughts were stepping behind a curtain. I know the word is there, he told his daughter, but it slips away like steam from a kettle. This wasn't dementia, not yet, but it was the gentle onset of something doctors call subtle cognitive decline, a stage where the mind doesn't collapse, but quietly retreats. In many cases, like Henry's, families dismissed early forgetfulness as typical aging. But the truth is more complex. The brain, like the heart or lungs, depends on healthy blood flow, proper oxygenation, and nutritional support. When circulation weakens or the brain becomes inflamed, often due to small vessel disease, chronic stress, or nutrient deficiencies, mental clarity begins to erode. Studies from Oxford University suggest that mild cognitive impairment can start 5-7 years before formal diagnosis, and that early lifestyle changes can delay serious decline. Dr. Lena Hoffman, a neurologist specializing in geriatric cognition, says, "It's not the forget." Henry's case became a turning point for his family. His daughter noticed that he not only repeated stories, but also withdrew from social gatherings he once loved. Sunday brunches became too overwhelming, phone conversations shorter. These are not just memory lapses, they're emotional indicators that the brain is struggling to process stimulation. Eventually, she brought him to a specialist, who diagnosed early vascular cognitive impairment. He was placed on a tailored regimen: omega-3 supplements, folate-rich foods, physical therapy, and daily memory training through music. Henry began playing piano again, not full concerts, but simple melodies that stirred something deep in his spirit. "Even if I forget the names," he said once, with a soft laugh, "the music remembers me." This sentence lingered with his family. It's the kind of quote that becomes a touchstone in elderly reflection. A simple phrase that captures the battle for identity, for presence, for dignity. And Henry's is not an isolated story. Around the world, especially across Europe and North America, Seniors in their 70s and 80s are experiencing similar quiet shifts. They forget where they put the kettle, but remember every detail of their childhood. They lose track of medication schedules, but recall the smell of their mother's kitchen. The brain does not fade in one direction. It flickers, struggles, and adapts. And that's why catching early signs matters. Because with the right support, the brain can still form new connections, still grow, still hold joy. But even as Henry's mind received attention, his immune system was telling a different story. A story his family missed at first. It started with a small scrape on his shin from a gardening accident. Nothing unusual, except that it took nearly 6 weeks to heal. Then came the cough, dry and persistent. Antibiotics were prescribed. It returned a month later. A urinary tract infection appeared. Then another. It felt like I had turned 90 overnight, Henry said. I wasn't bouncing back anymore. This slow, relentless fatigue wasn't just in his head. It was physiological. What Henry was experiencing was immune system aging, or immunosenescence. With age, the body's defense system grows less efficient. White blood cells respond more slowly, inflammation lingers longer, infections take deeper holds, cuts, colds, and simple flus become harder to fight off. For seniors like Henry, this doesn't just mean being sick more often. It means recovering becomes a process that drains energy, muscle, and confidence. Dr. Marina Luca, a senior health immunologist in Boston, explains, "We expect seniors to catch a bug now and then, but when infections repeat or linger too long, it's the immune system calling for backup." What's often overlooked is the role of nutrition and emotional well-being in immune function. After his wife passed, Henry ate more frozen dinners and less fresh food. He spent longer hours in silence, fewer in sunlight. His daughter hadn't realized how lonely he'd become until he mentioned talking to himself out loud, just to hear a voice. "It's not that I feel sad," he said. "It's that I feel like I'm disappearing." This emotional withdrawal, paired with the physical infections, made the issue clear. His body was not just aging, it was surrendering. With guidance from a local geriatric center, Henry began a new routine. He took daily walks to the post office, attended a local men's coffee group, and joined a gardening club that met once a week. His meals were upgraded to include lean protein, leafy greens, and probiotic-rich foods like yogurt and miso. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Within 3 months, his skin improved, his energy returned. He went the entire winter without a single infection. "I thought I needed medicine," he said. "Turns out I needed people." This is the kind of quote that defines elderly wisdom. That healing isn't only found in prescriptions, but in connection, purpose, and community. Henry's story, echoed in thousands of others across nursing homes, family kitchens, and senior centers, reminds us that the body doesn't just age, it reacts to how it is treated, how it is nourished, and how it is seen. For Henry, who had come through memory lapses and recurring infections with strength and grace, the next change felt more elusive but somehow more frightening. It began subtly, slight shortness of breath while climbing his garden stairs, a hint of dizziness after bending to tie his shoe. He would sometimes pause mid-sentence to catch his breath, or feel lightheaded after standing up. At first he told himself it was the weather, or perhaps just being a little out of shape. But deep down, Henry knew something deeper was shifting. One afternoon, while pruning roses in his small backyard, he felt an overwhelming tightness in his chest. It wasn't pain, but a pressure, like someone had quietly dimmed the air. He sat down, waited for it to pass, and never told his daughter. Not because he wasn't worried, but because he didn't want to worry her. The most urgent and final silent warning in many seniors is altered breathing and circulatory function, a whisper from the lungs and heart that the body is nearing a critical threshold. According to the American Heart Association, shortness of breath at rest, swelling in the legs, or unexplained fatigue can signal early heart failure or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. Both conditions common in those over 70, yet frequently underdiagnosed until crisis hits. For Henry, it wasn't pain. It was the subtle sensation of being winded by life's simplest movements. A walk to the mailbox felt like a slow climb uphill. His afternoon tea left him breathless if he moved too quickly. And slowly, the rhythm of his days began to change. Not by choice, but by force. Dr. Simone Redding, a cardiopulmonary specialist from Vancouver, explains, "Many older adults ignore these symptoms because they're not dramatic. But a quiet struggle for air or sudden drop in stamina may be the body's final call for intervention." For Henry, a cardiopulmonary assessment revealed mild atrial fibrillation and reduced oxygen saturation. Fortunately, because he acted early, his condition could be managed. He was prescribed medication to regulate heart rhythm and began a pulmonary rehabilitation program involving slow, guided breathing exercises, upper body mobility, and oxygen therapy when needed. But healing for Henry wasn't just medical, it was mental and emotional. As he adjusted to his new reality, he decided to reclaim what control he could. He started every morning with a breathing ritual by his window. 10 minutes of slow, controlled inhales. Watching the light creep across his street, he joined a virtual support group of other seniors with chronic lung or heart issues, where he shared stories, listened, laughed, and encouraged. Every breath I take now, I honor, he said, because I know what it means to lose one. He also began keeping a small journal of his sensations. What triggered breathlessness? What calmed it? Patterns began to emerge. Cold weather made it worse. Peppermint tea helped soothe it. This small act of self-awareness became a source of empowerment. This practice of mindfulness and community became his strength. Henry learned to pace his days, not out of defeat, but wisdom. He no longer chased every errand or stood through long church services, but he made space for presence. Afternoon sunlight on his face, classical music on vinyl, a letter to a friend. He wasn't doing less, he was doing what mattered. And in doing so, his oxygen levels stabilized, his mental clarity sharpened, his spirit lifted, even his posture improved, and with it, his breathing deepened. He found himself taking in moments he used to rush past. The smell of baked bread at his neighbor's window, the sound of a distant train, the simple joy of folding warm laundry. As his health steadied, Henry took it upon himself to mentor a younger man in his support group. Thomas, 66, newly diagnosed with COPD. They met weekly on video calls. Henry shared his story, but more importantly, he listened to Thomas's fears. "You're not broken," he told him once. "You're just being asked to pay closer attention. That's not weakness, that's wisdom." It was a moment that silenced the screen, and it reminded Henry how powerful it was to give meaning to his experience. His story, his slow walk. This is the final lesson Henry's story offers, one rooted deeply in elderly wisdom, that even when the body signals its limits, the soul still expands. Many seniors around the world, when facing heart failure or breathing issues, retreat not just physically but emotionally. But those who engage, who ask for help, who adapt, who stay connected, often live longer and more fully than those who don't. Henry's reflections, shared across community centers and hospital groups, became a quiet inspiration. "There's a kind of peace," he once said, "in finally listening to your body and letting it speak without shame." Aging doesn't erase vitality, it redirects it. Toward meaning, toward connection, toward clarity. The silent warnings, weight loss, fatigue, cognitive shift, immune breakdown, and breathlessness, are not sentences, they're signals. And if we respond with compassion and knowledge, we give ourselves and our loved ones the best chance at joy, strength, and peace. So as we close this series on elderly reflections, let this be our reminder. Aging does not mean fading, it means evolving. The body may change, but wisdom deepens, and purpose shifts into something richer, more meaningful. Listen to what your body tells you, not with fear, but with curiosity and care. Because sometimes a small breath, a misstep, or a moment of stillness holds more truth than any test. If this story moved you, if Henry's journey echoed something inside you or someone you love, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. These are the stories that deserve to be heard. And before you go, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below,